Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you very much for being here tonight. New Beginnings is honored and privileged to get to host this significant event, which will raise awareness and maybe even make a dent in a moral crisis for our city. I've only learned a little bit about what we're talking about tonight since one of the people responsible made us aware of the opportunity, Steve Myers. And I'm grateful for those who have shown up tonight to help lead us in growing in our understanding and how we might participate in addressing the matter. Enough said. I'm going to prove that preachers don't have to be long-winded. I did get the invitation, and therefore I will take the opportunity to begin this with prayer. I welcome you to join me or to listen in. Almighty God, we come to you in the name of Jesus. You've shown in Christ that your heart breaks for a world that is broken. You've shown us a proactiveness that converts our hearts, a love demonstrated by sacrificial love. And I pray that your heart, which is broken for our world and the likes of those that we are thinking of tonight, that you will use the information and our conversation to bring about change. We know that you would use us to accomplish great things, and so we commit this evening to you in the name of Jesus again. Everyone says amen. Amen. Mr. Myers.
Thank you, sir. Wow. Thank you, folks, for coming out here tonight. This is a little bit of an experiment for the church. We've got some technical issues that we're going to deal with. Huh? I'm not on? Joe, what'd you do to me? Now, that's the kind of guy Joe is. He will mess with me if there's an opportunity.
These microphones. Okay. Hello. So this one's working too, right, Mr. Torblanc? You got that? There you go. So you're good to go, bro.
All right. Maybe I just need to hold it to my mouth. All right. So I appreciate you bearing with us through things like that. All right, because we're going to figure some things out as we go. One of the things that we're doing tonight, Joe might have mentioned, is that we're going to have a live feed. So if people go to New Beginnings Facebook page, they'll be able to click on a link and they're going to be able to see this presentation. After we're done tonight, we're going to save that video feed, and then it's going to be professionally edited so that tonight will be recorded and then spliced into a professional piece that's going to be shared or able to be shared on social media. You'll be able to go back to it and refer to it time and time again. So we're excited about that. We're excited that you're all here, because this is a very, very important topic. We've wrestled with how to put this presentation together and what the content should be. I tell you, one of the things that we thought might happen tonight isn't, and that is to have a live or just a person here who is a survivor, who is a victim that has been rescued, to give their account of what they went through. And I'm kind of glad that that didn't happen this evening, and here's why. When I learned that it wasn't going to be, I started looking. I thought, well, maybe we'll have a substitute. Instead, we'll just do a YouTube video account of Survivor. So as I'm looking through these accounts from these folks who have been through hell, I realized how emotionally disturbing watching some of these accounts are. And folks, I didn't want to put you through that tonight. What you're going to hear is going to be disturbing enough. All right? But feel free, if you're so inclined, to go to YouTube and just type in human trafficking survivor. You're going to be astounded at what goes on. I'll give you, for instance, one young lady's account was that she was 16 years old, and on her 16th birthday, she calculated it up, and it would have been about 43,000 times she'd been raped. I can't fathom that. Another lady's account was that as an infant, she was sold by her mother and father into slavery to rich parents or rich adopters or whatever you want, owners. And she never knew another way. She was conditioned all her life growing up that her only purpose was to be at the beck and call of whoever they put her with. So when she was rescued, that started her, I guess, ascent out of that misery. So human trafficking is very real. It's one of the fastest growing criminal industries in the world. Traffickers reap billions in profits by using force, fraud, or coercion to rob victims of their freedom through labor or commercial sex. While experts estimate that there are a minimum of approximately 15,000 to 60,000 people trafficked into and within the U.S. each year, there are thousands of U.S. citizens trafficked within our borders, including an estimated 100,000 American children who are prostituted within the U.S. each year, this brutal form of human trafficking. In Missouri, victims of sex and labor trafficking include U.S. minors and adults. Missouri is what's considered a path as well as a destination for human trafficking, in addition to commercial front businesses and agricultural operations that people are forced to work at for next to nothing. To move victims between trafficking hotspots in Missouri, such as Kansas City and Springfield and St. Louis, as well as every state that borders us. Right here in Missouri, truck stops especially are known for playing host to sex trafficking. I read about one such account months ago that it just struck me, is that really going on here? And that started me researching this. What happened was this gal got out of a RV that was parked at this truck stop, and she was at a hurried pace to get away from it when somebody came out and caught her and dragged her back in. That caused someone who was alert enough to realize something's not right here, so it prompted a 911 call, which busted a prostitution ring, and this girl was working against her, and she was under the age of 18. So I'm like, is that really real? Is that really happening? So I started researching. I called my friend Nate Tate, who's a state representative here for the state of Missouri. Nate talked to me about how real it is. I remembered Lauren Ziegler from having met her at a fundraising thing that she was doing in St. Albans once before. And I remembered her saying that that was one of her platforms, that she, ever since she's been in pageants, that's something she's very passionate about. So I called and talked with her about it. I called and talked with Sheriff Pelton, and I said, will you come and speak on behalf of law enforcement about how crucial it is that the citizens are aware that this is going on around them? One of the things I want you to know is my kids, and Lindsay's here in the room, all their life I've brought them up to, and one of the things I've told her time and time again, and Zach, is be aware of what's going on around you. So many of us aren't. And if we were in tune to a possible abduction kind of situation, what kind of a difference might we have made if we were? So that's why we're here tonight. I applaud you for being here, because you're taking time out to come and study something that may be life-changing in misery right now. So that's my hope and my prayer for this evening. Before we get started, I have a couple thank yous to make. Thank you to Pastor Joe Sullivan and for the staff of New Beginnings for co-hosting this event with me tonight. I really appreciate the opportunity to bring these folks here for this purpose. Thanks also to Strotman Printing. Brian Strotman, I took a flyer to him that I put together, and I said, hey, would you print out 50 of these? He said, yeah, what's it about? So I told him about it. I said, just give me the invoice. He said, no, there's no invoice. So today, this morning, actually my friend Lisa, she says, hey, do we have anything that we can hand out tonight? This was yesterday, last evening, right? I hadn't thought about that. So I go see Brian this morning, and I said, Brian, is there a way we could print up some business cards so these folks could have a national hotline number to put in their wallet? And he says, absolutely. And right there, while I stood there and waited, I went in with the idea, I left with the business cards. And it only took him maybe 20 minutes to crank them out, and there's no invoice. Brian Strotman's a great guy. So So without any more of me talking, I'm going to introduce to you the former Miss Missouri, United States in 2016. She's a humanitarian. She's Miss USA of 2017. Lauren Ziegler is a wife and a mother to 2 young toddlers, an entrepreneur, a model. She uses her position to empower women of all ages and believes that it's vital for her children to make a difference in the community. She's extremely dedicated and passionate about fighting against human trafficking. It's a great honor to present Miss USA 2017, Lauren Ziegler.
Hello. What a beautiful group of people, and I can't tell you how absolutely to know that people who are local to me, I live in Missouri, care and have taken the time out of their Friday night to come out and learn about how they can make a difference in something that is plaguing our country, plaguing our city right here, plaguing the world. And I like to start out and say that each and every one of you absolutely can make a difference. It only takes one person to give everything they've got to fight against injustices in the world. And I can't imagine what the county of Franklin County could do, or even the state of Missouri could do, if each and every one of you went out today, a changed person, dedicated to knowing the signs of human trafficking, educating yourselves to knowing the signs of human trafficking, and also paying attention to what is going on in legislation to combat human trafficking. You know, your legislators listen to you, and there are so many bills that are due to be passed this spring that if each and every one of you were to reach out to your local legislation, could make a world of difference. As he said, I'm Lauren Ziegler, Mrs. United States, and I fight against child abuse and child trafficking all over the country. I'm very passionate about this issue because children cannot speak for themselves. It's our responsibility as adults and as Americans who are the land of the free, the home of the brave, to fight for the freedom of those who are in bondage and those who have no voice and no freedom to speak for themselves. And I think that that says a lot as Americans and also as Christians, so much to speak about the freedom of Christ. But it's hard for us as Christians to say the word sex, okay? And this is sex trafficking. This is prostitution, underage prostitution. And this is something that's been very difficult for our country in the past, let's just say 100 years to talk about. But I think that right now we're realizing, we're waking up, and we're realizing as a community, as a church, and as a people that we've been way too long. And that is what is leading to the fastest growing crime in the world. The fastest growing crime in your country, where you live, where your children live, where your nieces and nephews, where your children live. And I like to speak about legacy. Picture for a minute, you're lying on your deathbed. What world are you leaving for your future great-great-great-great-grandchildren? What future have you left? What future do you plan on leaving? And I would say that if you do not plan for a safer future for your children and their children, then you've completely dropped the ball. I don't want to be remembered for the shiny hat, the sparkly sash, shoes. I want to leave a legacy of influencers that globally impact the world. And that is what life is about. You have the gift of waking up today. And your job is to make sure that those who wake up tomorrow have a better future, have a better tomorrow. A lot of questions that I get asked is this really happening in the United States? And yes, it is happening in the United States, but it's not what you're picturing. And I think that that's where the problem lies, is that we're picturing the movie Taken. We're picturing a big white van pulling up and, you know, grabbing someone off the side of the street and throwing like a black, you know, cover over their face so they can't see where they're being taken. Yes, that happens. Yes, that is, you know, something that is happening in the United States. But that is not how your children and how people are actually being targeted on a regular basis. I would say right now, as far as human trafficking goes, social media is probably the biggest dangers as far as human trafficking goes. And this is something that, you know, I love my smartphone as much as anyone else. I think that there's a lot of benefits that comes from, you know, social media. We can share positive messages. We can raise awareness faster than we ever did. We can, you know, there's so many benefits to it. But with that comes the risk that is, you know, the predators who are using that against us. Parents often ask me, what can they do to keep their children safe, their grandchildren safe? And the number one thing that I can tell you all to do is to monitor your children's cell phones and social media. They will fight you on this, but in the end, an involved parent is going to see their children through to safety. Gaming apps, Snapchat, Facebook. These are where your children are being targeted. Let me give you an example. A girl goes on her social media. She's had an argument with her parents. She doesn't mean anything by it. She's a great kid. She gets on there and says, the predator is waiting for that. Because if he can put a ledge between you and your parents, he has the power. If he can convince you that he's the long-term relationship, he's where hope is, come stay with me for a few weeks until you work this out. Let's go hate our dads together. Meet me at this party. That's all it takes. And your child is not a bad child. We all remember what it's like to be a teenager and wanting to be accepted, wanting to be loved. And it's a very volatile time. Social media, again, can be such a wonderful thing. But in the hands of teenagers, it is the absolute perfect condition for predators to see what it's going to take to target your child. Listed on their social media is their favorite bands, what they like, their dislikes, their likes. That's all they need. Oh yeah, I love that band too. Yeah, everything is working against that child in the situation who is feeling alone or feeling hopeless. So you very much need and must monitor your child's Facebook and social media accounts. I would check every single app on your child's phone. Now with every single app, you pretty much can message every single person who's involved in that. Maybe it's a game or, like I said, the gaming apps. You can actually communicate back and forth with the people who are playing these games with you. This is a very normal way for those who are grooming children to target your children. Other signs to look for, parents, grandparents, anyone, maybe you just know a child, would be extra cell phones, extra spending money, pulling away from parents, pulling away from school and authorities, gifts, expensive gifts, disheveled looks and appearances, and perhaps drug use. All of these things are things that, we would be we can't cover all the signs and everything you can do to combat trafficking in this amount of time. I just urge you to educate yourselves to know the signs of human trafficking and what you can do to prevent and also report human trafficking in your. I always say, follow your gut. If it feels wrong, 9 times out of 10 it's wrong. There's a human trafficking hotline. It's open 24/7. It's completely anonymous. So let's say, you feel like something's wrong. You witness something, you feel like something's off, you think that perhaps someone is being trafficked, and you want to report it. This is absolutely vital to combating human trafficking. There's a hotline that's completely anonymous, open 24/7, and this has saved so many lives all over our country. And I urge you all right now to pull out your cell phones. Pull out your cell phones. Let's plug that number in. It's the National Human Trafficking Hotline, open 24/7, completely anonymous. If you don't want to give your name, you do not have to, but this could save a life. It's 1-888-373-7888. Follow your gut. Your gut is always right. I am very, very, very passionate about fighting against child abuse and child trafficking. There was a time in my life where I did witness something, and I was told by a superior at work to let it go for the weekend. By Monday, this child who was killed due to violence. This has always been extremely important to me to realize that your gut could literally save a life, save a human being's life. And there are so many human beings right now who are in need of your help. It's estimated that 100,000 to 300,000 children in the United States alone are being exploited. That's just children. Average age for entering into the sex trade industry is 12 to 13, 14 years old. That means that any adult who is being exploited right now started or was targeted when they were kids. So if your idea or your way of explaining away and making it okay that a prostitute can sell her body because it's her choice is because she chose that way of life, you're absolutely wrong. She has been targeted and abused her entire life. And I can tell you right now that no woman ever sought out to become a prostitute. And with that, I urge you to leave the legacy of safety, love, freedom, and hope that our country stands for and what Christ stands for. And you can do that by raising awareness, voting for those who are going to make a difference in your communities, combating human trafficking, and really just speaking about it. It's very hard to talk about. It's kind of like, childhood cancer. We don't want to talk about it. This keeps me up at night. It's not fun and it's not pleasant, and all the things that I hear, it's piled on me every single day. But this is our responsibility, and this is what our silence has cost us. And we must fight back. We have to get angry enough. We have to get passionate enough to make a difference. And I guarantee you that each and every one of you can go and make a difference in someone's life. And even if you just save one, the ripple effect of that one life is absolutely priceless. Thank you so much for coming. I'm going to introduce you to the Sheriff of Franklin County, and he can let you know a little bit more specifically of what
was that number again?
1-888-373-7888, and I know they have printouts of that number. Where do you have that?
We're going to hand it to them as they leave.
We're going to hand it to you as you leave. So if you didn't get in your phone, make sure you get that. But having, because it's so easy to reference and it's anonymous. And if we could just report everything that's happening in our country that we've turned a blind eye to, imagine the difference that we could make.
I'll bring Steve.
Okay. Thank you all.
Thank you, Lauren, very much. Appreciate your insights. The next speaker that we've got I have known for about 28 years by my best calculation. He is a family man. He's a man of God. He has been in law enforcement all of those 28 years. And this last year, in January, he was elected to serve for Franklin County. So Steve Pelton, he has learned that law enforcement officers play a critical role in identifying victims of human trafficking, and he believes that the citizens, if they're educated in it, can help those law enforcement officers to do a better job. So here's Steve Pelton.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. What a great showing. It's great to see the community come out and get educated and, quite frankly, get a chance to collaborate and bring light to the issues. During the initial introduction, he talked about human trafficking, and quite frankly, that says it all on the board. It's a modern day form of slavery, and it's been around a long time. When we talk about human trafficking, there's two things that come to mind. I got to step down because that light. The two things that come to mind is the commercial sex trafficking and labor trafficking. So when we think about commercial sex trafficking, and Miss United States is correct, it's a topic no one wants to talk about, but the fact of the matter, it's real. So the first thing that comes to most people's mind when we talk about this is some of the brothels and the prostitutes out in Las Vegas. Did anybody think of that when we mentioned that? If you've ever been to Las Vegas and you pay attention to the prostitutes and the people trying to sell them women, that is a tough way to go. They don't choose to be in that situation. When you really look at the situation, what I've seen is they're young kids. There's somebody from across the border. They've been promised a better way of life. So they come to the United States for that better way of life, and they get trapped into that. They don't know people up here. They're getting a portion of the money. Who's making the money? The pimp's making the money. They're making a very good living at it. These women are getting barely enough money to take care of themselves, so they get trapped in that. So with the trap, some of them are undocumented, so they can't go to law enforcement for help. And when you look at law enforcement in our country, I stand before you and say I'm very proud to be a part of that. But I also know that law enforcement is corrupt. Everyone's heard horror stories of being across the border and getting stopped by the police. That is real. So when people grow up in that environment and they're scared of law enforcement officers, they're not eager to come forward and ask for help and reach out. So it's alive and well. When we talk about commercial sex trafficking, Lauren brought up a valid point. 20 years ago, it wasn't what it is today. There is a lot of young women and men that are being exploited, sexually exploited with the use of, and to the point of we've actually worked some cases that we call sextortion, where they're extorting these people. They're pretending to be befriend them. You've got this creeper guy on the end of a computer, possibly in as far away as a different state or a different country, that's pretending to be the same age child as them, 14-year-old, and they're encouraging them to send pictures, and then the pictures comes across, and then they're extorting them by saying, we want you to send something else, and it progresses in the videos because they're scared they're going to publish. What the young lady in the back said about monitor your child stuff, get involved, and you absolutely have to protect your children. There's a lot of people out there that will take advantage and exploit them. So when we look at that and we think about prostitution, here in the United States in particular, a lot of prostitution starts with runaways. A child runs away, they run away and normally they go to an unfamiliar place. If I lived in the city limits of Pacific and a child was to run away, best case scenario for law enforcement and families, right? They're right here in town somewhere. Doesn't always happen that way. They go to another town, they go to another municipality, they go to another state, they get trapped in that street. These people will prey on them children at public transport areas, they'll befriend them, they'll make promises with them. Oftentimes they'll get them addicted to narcotics to get them trapped into that circle. They don't know anybody there. They don't have a place to go. They get trapped in that vicious cycle. People at a young age do not say, I want to grow up and live that life. They get trapped in that. So us as citizens, I've preached this since the first of the year. We're stronger together. And when we collaborate, we can make a difference. We can identify a possible victim. The biggest thing is if you see something, say something. Worst case scenario is really the best case scenario for us. Worst case scenario, you're wrong. Best case scenario, we don't have a victim. So we don't mind them calls as law enforcement officers. If I take 1,000 bogus calls in regards to this and not one of them pans out, that's a good thing, folks. That's a good thing. We took an oath and we took a promise to protect the innocent, and we'll do that. I just don't speak on behalf of the sheriff's office. I speak for every law enforcement officer I know. People care. I know you guys care. If you didn't care, this room wouldn't be packed right now. So by working together and talking about some signs to maybe look for, maybe we can prevent that. The other portion of that is dealt with across the nation is labor trafficking. We've got the commercial sex trafficking. We've talked a little bit about that. We got the labor trafficking. Why is the labor trafficking going on out there? There's low risk for the trafficker to get caught. Why is there low risk? Some of these people traveling through are undocumented. They feel trapped. There's some hotel establishments, you'll see somebody get promised a job. They work long hours, low pay, a lot of times no breaks. They have nowhere to go. They're being allowed to stay there. Often, which means they charge a fee for them to be there. And as hard as they work, they never get the opportunity to pay that off and get their freedom, if you would. They have nowhere to go. And remember, oftentimes they won't reach out to law enforcement. Why won't they reach out to law enforcement? Because not all law enforcement is fair globally. There's a lot of countries out there that law enforcement is feared. So we need to watch for stuff like that. Migrant workers that comes into the big farms across the United States. That's okay. They're here for an honest day's work, for an honest day's pay. Where it becomes trafficking is when you've got somebody that brings them up here and they're the middleman. They're collecting the money for all the workers and then they're not giving them an honest day's pay. They brought them up here for that reason. They don't have anybody to go to. They can't get back home. There's documented cases where oftentimes they didn't even know what state they was in. I will tell you that during the course of my career, I have come in contact with people that has been involved with labor trafficking. One of them was just probably a half mile from where I'm standing at right now. 10 years ago, a cargo van exited Interstate 44 and got on the service road because there was a law enforcement officer just happened to be behind it, out-of-state tags, had Texas tags on the vehicle. As they turned onto Hogan Road, the vehicle accelerated, the vehicle ran off the roadway and rolled. And there was, my memory serves me, there was approximately a dozen illegal Mexicans that got out of that vehicle and fled. One of them was on scene that was hurt. They were scared to death of us as law enforcement officers. So we spent the next 4 to 5 hours trying to locate these individuals. And we wasn't looking to locate them because they did anything wrong. We were looking to locate them to ensure that they was okay. That vehicle had rolled. The only thing they was a victim of is being scared, and That vehicle was en route to the state of New York to a catering company. They come all the way up across the border, and the driver of that is what we call was a mule, which means they're transporting them individuals. So he gets a big cut of that, and I had the opportunity to sit and visit with a couple of the individuals that was involved in the accident. They're no different than us, folks. They want to feed their family. They're up here to provide for their family. I was in Mexico, and I seen a gathering on a parking lot of a group of workers sitting around, and people would pull in, and they would offer them to come and work for them and negotiate their pay down to little or nothing. And they'd load them up. They take them out to a job site at the end of the workday, usually when sun sets. They're dropping them back off, little to no money. I got a friend in Mexico. His name is Elder, and he was telling stories about how people are taken advantage of, and because there's no economy down there, they would work for $5 a day. $5 a day just to try and provide for their family. Now, I know their exchange rate is different, but folks, that except for being victimized. So when we look at labor trafficking, other times that it comes across the United States is what we commonly refer to as storm chasers. Remember when we had the big hailstorms? We've had the mini tornadoes, I guess. I don't want to compare it to a Joplin or something, where there's a lot of damage. We see all the out-of-state companies coming in, people that don't speak English, people that don't communicate. If you get involved in anything like that, that could be a legitimate company. But you make sure them workers are getting an honest day's pay for an honest day's work. And you make sure that that person facilitating that is not exploiting these people and taking advantage of them. Remember, the reason it exists is low risk. Remember, they're scared to say anything, and high profits. When you got 20 people that you're paying little to nothing on, and you're the guy reaping large portions of that money that should be going to them, there's high profits involved. Sometimes the people we come with, again, as I stated, is scared of law enforcement. They're scared to come. Some things to watch for. What you need to watch for is the young, cladly dressed ladies that are out there accompanied by somebody. If you're in doubt, pick the phone up and call. You need to check for the person that looks malnourished or the person that appears to be beaten. And an addict, remember, that very well could have started on the streets. A lot of prostitutes start out with being a runaway. They need to provide. They need food. They have nowhere else to go, and then they get trapped in that vicious circle. And if we can just make a difference and save one life, that's huge. So get involved. Make a call to that hotline if you suspect something. And let's try and make a difference. One of the estimates I got is there's 21 million victims of human trafficking globally. So when you think about that globally, and I know we're here in Pacific, Missouri, Franklin County, Missouri, thinking of the state of Missouri, but this is something that is a global problem. You hear the horror stories of some of the third world countries where girls are sold. That wouldn't exist if there wasn't a market for it. The sextortion wouldn't exist if there wasn't a market for it. So when you actively get involved, and if you see something that's not right, you absolutely say something and let us identify it. Some other potential red flags: excessively long or unusual work hours, not allowed breaks, recruitment through false promises of pay and a better living. There's a lot of people end up in the United States because we're the land of the free, the land of opportunity. And that is true. We live in the greatest country in the world. However, when you're up here on false promises for a better life and you get trapped in that vicious cycle, that's no way to live. They have families. They're a person. They absolutely matter. So I talked to you guys about a couple of incidents that I told you about, the accident that happened not too long ago here. During the course of my career, I've made numerous stops out on Interstate 44. It is a thoroughfare. It's a pass-through state for different destinations. And we want to train, and we want to identify, and we always try and go the extra step. A lot of times they may not speak English. They may be scared to talk to law enforcement. I'll tell you what we're doing. We're taking the extra step, and we're ensuring that that person is not a victim. And I'll give you an example that state of Texas did a couple years ago. State of Texas recovered one victim of human trafficking. They put training to all their Texas Rangers. Their deputies are called Rangers down. It's pretty cool. I'd like to be called a Ranger. But they're called Texas Rangers. They did some training. That following year, they identified 9 victims of human trafficking because they dug a little deeper. They didn't take it at face value. Remember, when you stop that car, that victim inside is not always eager to tell us what's going on. That's all they have. They have nowhere to go. Even if they get severed from that trafficker or get rescued from that trafficker, they still have no income. And depending where they're from, they may not have a place to go back to that can fund that, that can put food on the table for them. So they're much like us. They're just trying to get by. So with that, I'll wrap up. Thank you guys for being here tonight. I have an open line. If anybody's got any questions, they can see me this evening here. Open door at the Sheriff's Office. You're more than welcome. That Sheriff's Office belongs to you, and I work for you. You're welcome to come in. Be happy to sit down and talk with you more. But what I really want you to take away from this is we are stronger together. When we collaborate, good things are going to happen. I'm one person. There's 100 people in this room. So instead of one person looking, if we've got 100 people out there protecting the innocent, we are stronger. So thank you guys for being here. God bless.
Thank you, Sheriff Pelton. Thank you, Sheriff Pelton. Appreciate you very much. I can't believe he was up here in front of you all for... And he did not mention Proposition P once. All right, so without taking up a lot of time on Proposition P, I'll tell you this. Lori and I got the opportunity, Sheriff Pelton graciously allowed us to come up to the prison facility we have here in Franklin County and take a tour through the whole facility. And what we were witness to is an overcrowding situation, evidence room that's stacked to the ceiling. There's no place more to go with the evidence they have. This building was built 30 years ago with a life expectancy of 20. It had room for 100 prisoners. Now they're averaging 150. You do the math. There's a office space that was designed for 2 officers. Now it's serving 7. It's not good, folks. Franklin County's jail is overcrowded. All right, so I'll give you, for instance, let's bring it home. Here in Pacific, just last week, we had a drug bust, and we took in 7 people into our little jail in Pacific City Hall. Well, that's a felony, what they did. So it would be normal routine for us to send those prisoners to Franklin County to house them until their court date. But guess what? There's no room for them in the inn. So what happens is they're released. They still have a court date. They're still expected to appear. But they go right back to doing what they were doing the day before. Because we don't have the space in Franklin County. Now, if it was a serious crime against someone else, harming an individual, that's dealt with a little differently. There's still no room in the inn. But what they end up doing is paying $50 a day to ship them to a that will house them until their court date. And guess who pays for that? Franklin County taxpayers. You're not here to hear about Prop P. But I want you to just imagine this. in a human trafficking situation, if there was violent harm against an individual, it would be treated that way, where that person would be taken in, I'm sure, and housed in another facility. But if there was no harm, if there was no injury, that person might be released and go right back to doing what they were doing the day before. We've got to stop that. And Prop P is an opportunity for us to help. So that's in April on the ballot. So our next speaker. First off, I want to say thank you to one other individual. We now have this live streaming, right? You all know that. And we're monitoring how many people are watching right now. And good. You know, it's great. There's people on there. One of them is a guy by the name of Andy Nemeth. And Andy is Alderman for the City of Pacific also. And we've gotten to be buddies. And Andy is the one who set up our live streaming tonight. And then he couldn't be here this evening because he's attending to a family matter. So I won't go into detail on that, but he had to go to Michigan. But Andy, I wish you the best. Glad you're watching, and thank you for helping us get that live feed set up. So now, I want to tell you about our next speaker. He was elected to the Missouri House of Representatives in January of 2017. Representative Nate Tate is married. He's got 3 children of his own. He also has a passion for helping people with human trafficking. And by strengthening our state legislation and working towards the goal of making it a crime. See, some of the traffic victims, they're changed hands along the way. And some of those hands that have dealt with these people, it wasn't defined that they were breaking a law, but they were breaking a law. So as we delve into this, as we learn more about it, as we change the laws to fit the crimes, then law enforcement can do something about it. So he's helping by strengthening law enforcement's grasp and hold on these people once they're convicted. So here's Representative Nate Tate.
All right, thank you, Steve. He basically just told you my whole spiel. So this will be pretty short and sweet. No. Is this okay? Okay. So I am the state representative for District 119, which is roughly the southern half of Franklin County and northwestern Washington County. And whenever I decided I was going to run for office, I was going to be a voice for the people. I wanted to do the right things because, you know, we see on TV all the time how these officials get to where they're going and they kind of forget about the small guy. And, you know, I wanted to be the guy that didn't do that. I wanted to help make Missouri a better place to live, to work, to raise a family. But quite honestly, I wasn't really sure what that meant or where that was going to lead me. Sure, lower taxes, better roads, better education, those are all great things. But I was introduced to human trafficking just a little less than a year ago. So I'm still learning quite a bit. And, you know, it stuck to me. I was like, you know what? This is something that I can actually grab a hold of and make an impact at a much higher level than just being alderman in St. Clair, which is where I live, by the way. But so, you know, I was like, gosh, I don't know where to start because it's such a broad crime and there's so many aspects to it. It's so widespread. You know, just in the U.S. alone, it's a $30 billion a year industry. So I wasn't sure where to start. But from the legislative standpoint, in 2016, they finally realized that this was a really big deal, and they put together a human trafficking task force. And this was headed up by Elijah Haar, who's from the Springfield area. And what they did was they traveled around the state to 8 different locations, organizations, and trying to learn more about it, how to fight it, what we can do to try to stop it, and things of that nature. And so what they found was there was some common themes from people who came to testify. And so I've got my notes here. I apologize. I'm not quite as prepared as I would like to be for something like this. It's been kind of crazy in Jeff City the last week and a half. But so the first theme is victims of human trafficking need to be properly identified as victims and treated as such. I think that's pretty self-explanatory, as most of these are. Funding necessary to provide care and shelter for victims of trafficking, a singular point of contact for information and assistance, which I think we got tonight from Lauren, standardized education materials for training and for implementing policies, and then vacating convictions. So a lot of times what happens is the trafficking victims get caught up in crimes that they're forced to commit. They didn't willingly do them or commit them. And so what they found was that, you know, they're having a hard time, if they are able to get out of trafficking, they're having a hard time moving on with their life by getting jobs and everything associated with having a criminal background. And so this was something that was very evident, and a lot of folks testified too. And then focusing on demand. Now, what that means is if we could take the demand away for this nasty crime, then it'll go away. And so I think, to me, that was probably one of the biggest themes of what they found in their task force. And I'll talk about that in just a little bit. But unfortunately, I don't have a lot to talk about from a legislative standpoint because we don't have a lot of laws that have been passed in the last few years. So in 2016, there was one bill that was passed, and all it does really is it expands the crime of sexual trafficking to include advertising a child participating in a commercial sexual act. So it just basically added a little bit to the definition, but also currently with the Secretary of State, they administer a program that protects victims of domestic violence, rape, sexual assault, and stalking by assigning a substitute address to such victims. So state and local governments, they have to accept this substitute address when they're creating public records relating to a participant in this program. So this bill also allows victims of human trafficking to participate. That's all that was passed in 2016. So 2017, so just last year, there was a bill which more than likely looks like it was an amendment because it's part of the Foster Care Bill of Rights, sorry. And what it did was it just added the definition of added to the definition of child abuse and neglect, sex trafficking, and severe forms of trafficking. And there are some federal monies that were tied to that as well, in the neighborhood of $423,000 or something of that nature that helps take care of children. And so we had to make that change last year to be able to get that money. So that was 2017. So there's not a lot to report there. However, 2018 is a new year, and there's been a lot of bills that have been filed so far. One bill that we just passed out of the House this week deals with the human trafficking hotline and a poster. So this poster would be put up in places of where human trafficking might occur, where the most evident places might be, such as a truck stop, a motel, and even an abortion clinic. And I didn't really understand the abortion clinic, but when the females become pregnant, they send them to the clinic to have an abortion. Well, they don't go in with them, at least typically. And so if the poster's up in there, they see the poster, they can maybe say something to a worker, maybe somehow make the phone call, or remember the number to where they maybe have a chance to make a call later. And so I thought that was really interesting. Now, that's a House bill. There's a Senate bill, which is the exact same thing. And then there's another bill related to human trafficking that basically just makes the offense. Right now, the offense, if you're committed to that offense, it's basically a 5-year penalty. This bill just changes it to a 10+ year penalty. So it just stiffens it. I don't even think 10 years is enough, but nonetheless, that's what this bill does. So the next one, I'm going to read the summary of this just so that I don't mess it up. But this bill adds knowingly exposing obscene material or an obscene performance to a minor to the offense of endangering the welfare of a child in the first degree. So this kind of goes back to the grooming. As the predator gets closer to the child, they are able to, and this starts to groom them to do the nasty, disturbing acts. So this next one actually deals with prostitution, but there's a lot of technical stuff in here, so I'm not going to try to reiterate that and bore you with it, but what it does is it prohibits the prosecution of a child under the age of 18 for the offense of prostitution. And it increases the penalties for those who are, say, the buyer, the purchaser of prostitution. And any person convicted of patronizing a prostitute shall be required to register as a sexual offender if the individual patronized is under the age of 18. So right now, there's very little punishment for anybody who does this. There's really nothing to keep them from doing it. There's nothing to discourage it. And so this goes after the purchaser, the buyer. If they register as a sex offender when they get caught, well, maybe that will help discourage them. In the Philippines, they've done this, and they said it's just about all but stopped human trafficking. So I think this is a phenomenal bill. So this next one's really disturbing. It's marriage licenses. And by the way, most of these bills are filed by Gene Evans, who is from Manchester. And so this is currently a county recorder must issue a license authorizing the marriage of any person under 15 years of age, so long as certain requirements are met. What this bill does is it increases that age to 17 years and requires a court to hold a hearing requiring the parties seeking a marriage license to present evidence that the marriage is advisable. A marriage license shall not be issued to any person 21 years of age or older if the other party to the marriage is less than 17 years of age, or if either party is under 15 years of age. So they are required to provide proof of age documentation. So right now in Missouri, there really is there's no limit. An 8-year-old could get married. There are people that bring children to Missouri to get them married. Some extreme religions have certain aspects that if the child, in most cases a female, is raped, they will bring them to Missouri and they will make them marry their rapist. That's disturbing. So this bill is going to make that tougher, and hopefully it'll stop it. So the last bill that I have right now, and there's more bills that could be filed, but this is just all that was filed that we had down as of this week. And this is actually a bill that I'm working on, and it's currently being drafted right now, and it's just kind of a technical bill. So when the criminal code was rewritten in 2015, there was some oversight that was done. And so what happened was the criminal code for sex trafficking in the second degree is considered a non-reunifiable offense. And then the code does not list sex trafficking in the first degree as a non-reunifiable offense. Sorry, that's a hard word to say, apparently. Anyway, so what this oversight does in the criminal code is it could potentially result in children being reunited with their parents that are convicted of sex trafficking of a child that is under 12 years of age. So you can see how this legislation is very important to get it fixed and get it fixed right away. So that's really all we have right now. You know, as Steve and Lauren have alluded to, you know, we are better together. I would say definitely if anyone has any thoughts, ideas on legislation that we could file, contact your legislator, your senator, your representative. I assure you they will listen. Everybody knows that this is a serious crime. This is a serious problem. And definitely will, you know, none of us know everything. So if somebody has an idea or a way, a thought, something, anything, let us know. So with that, that's all I have. Thank you, Steve.
You have that other mic. You need to be up here. Thank you, Representative Tate. Appreciate you. All right, now, we've got a real treat. And that is Lindsay Ellis is here from a place called the Covering House, which I knew absolutely nothing about a month ago. But as we're researching, we're preparing for this evening, I learned about the Covering House. They've got a great website that explains their mission, their purpose, what they do. I'm not going to try to explain it all, but the victims who are rescued My understanding is if they're under the age of 18, many of them are far from home, and the home they came from may not be a place they want to return. Covering House steps in and helps them to regenerate and be able to survive in society on their own. So without taking up any more of her time, here's Lindsay Ellis, the Executive Director.
Doesn't matter which one I use.
Use both of them at the
Both
same
of them?
time.
The same time, okay.
Yeah. This is a real privilege for me because I don't always get to talk in churches. And so as a former youth pastor, I'm going to take advantage if that's okay. We were talking about what should we share, and it's hard for me because there's so much. Both of them at the same time. I'm a hand talker too, so we'll do this because this one needs to be free. And so as I was talking about what should we talk about, I think it really comes down to our mission. We were started by Dee Dee Lehman. She literally was watching a documentary in her living room, and we always joke because her line is it pierced her heart because there was a small segment on domestic minor trafficking. And so she took her husband, Greg, Greg is our unsung hero. They prayed about it and they decided she was going to take a year off and see what the need was. And from that kind of act of obedience came the Covering House. And the mission is a place providing refuge and restoration for minors who have experienced exploitation and trafficking. And so I think when we're really talking about tonight, it's messy. And there's a lot of messiness that happens. There's night terrors, and there's flashbacks, and we were talking yesterday, one of the girls described how she felt alone because she was in a family that wouldn't even let her sleep with her sister, and it was cold and there wasn't heat. And you hear those stories. And we talk a lot about the refuge part because we talk a lot about rescuing and making girls feel safe, and we forget that the restoration part comes next, and it's long. And I think if we're really, we're here in a church, so I think that's the appropriate thing for us to talk about, is that the restoration part. And I like to talk about hope because I think sometimes trafficking is tied with the messy images, and we forget there's hope, right? And we get the privilege of that because we get to work with the girls. So this week is a really good week for us to be here because over a year ago, we had an interview with a girl, and she basically was in detention, and her paperwork was horrific. And she would say no one would take her. What really had happened is she was a trafficking victim, and she had substance abuse, and from that led to violence, some violence on law enforcement. And I don't know, I kind of like her, thinking we should maybe take a chance. And her first week at school, because we do on-site school as well, and Annie is here, she is our educator, and she can tell you the full story, but literally the girl would show up to school every day. And every day Annie would say, "Thank you for coming to school, thank you for coming to school." Well, what happened is, so this week she started college in a year, 13 months. She recovered, not only did she start going to school, she recovered enough credits to graduate high school a semester early and started this week to college, which is restoration. She realized that she didn't have an opportunity to do anything in school. She was labeled a troublemaker, and that led to things over and over and over and over again. The part that's my favorite part is her family is now going back to school because she came from a family that loved her, but they worked weird shifts, which is where she became vulnerable. Lauren talked earlier about vulnerabilities. That's really what it is when I first started at the Covering House, the thing that kind of fueled I'm very mellow until I'm not. And the thing that fueled me is I was reading an article by a former trafficker, pimp, and he said, basically, I find whatever hole a girl has and I put myself in it. So if she needs a dad, I become her dad. If she needs a boyfriend, I become her boyfriend. If she needs new shoes, I buy her new shoes. Well, that made me angry because if he can do it, why can't we do it? Right? Because that's really what it is kids are vulnerable and they exploit that vulnerability. That's where our restoration piece comes in, and what we're trying to do is, what vulnerabilities do those kids have? Let's give them opportunities. Let's give them a school environment that they love. She's building solar ovens in her free time, and I don't even know what that is. She was trying to build
Newton's cradle pendulum. And I was like, I'll help you after I Google it and find out what I need to do. Like, I don't know. It's those little things that you see on your desk that go back and forth. She was trying to do it out of popsicle sticks. Genius, but nobody knew it because we kind of forgot about her. So again, like I said, I'm going to take advantage if that's okay, because I don't always get to do this. But when I was trying to decide if I was going to come to the covering house, this was the verse. Is it okay if I share this? Verse that kind of made me say, this is the job. Because I was the first hire of the covering house in 2012. That tells you how far we've come. And it was extremely part-time. About 10 hours a week, with 40 hours a week work, but 10 hours a week. Very part-time. We've come very far. But this also ties in with what Lauren was saying earlier, is that this is Proverbs 31:8-9. It says, speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves, for the rights of all who are destitute. Speak up and judge fairly. Defend the rights of the poor and the needy. So hopefully I'm doing an okay job, but summarize why we're here tonight. It's for that. This is a chance for you guys to become aware, and then from there you have to speak out. Like, we have to, it's a command, right? Speak up for those who can't speak up for themselves. So thank you guys for letting us be here, and I appreciate it.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you, Lindsay. So they have a table set up outside. So take their literature, whatever they have. Javier's here. He'll help answer some questions as well. But we're going to have all of our speakers come back and have a question and answer where anybody that wants to ask questions, start thinking them up in your head what do you want to hear that hasn't been said. They're here tonight to answer. So while they're coming and getting in place, I've asked Tim Baker if he would help me. We're going to pass a basket around, and every dollar that goes in that basket will go straight to the Covering House to help support their cause. So if you want to make a check out, it's to the Covering House, okay? Not to New Beginnings Lutheran Church. Make it straight to the Covering House. So while they're getting in place, Tim and I are going to do that. I want to mention one more thing real quick, and that is that while Lori and I, oh, by the way, I want to thank Lori, my lovely wife, who helped me get all the flyers and get the Facebooks out and all this kind of stuff. She supports anything I want to do, and it's just so great to have her. But while we were at Franklin County Sheriff's Office touring, there was another gentleman that was there. His name is State Representative Paul Kurtman. And Paul Kurtman has been a warrior against this kind of cause, as well as many, many others, for more than 7 years now. So he is here with us tonight as well. Stand in the back of the room, that's Paul Kurtman. Okay, so while Tim and I are doing our thing, you guys can start doing yours, and I will come around and hand someone the mic who has a question. But very important is that whoever is answering is holding this mic in their hands so it goes over the live feed. Okay?
I'll make sure they get it.
Are these on? Oh, yeah, did I?
Okay, so who has the first question?
Not so much a question to offer. I've done extensive volunteer work with homeless outreach groups in the city of St. Louis. And what I've learned is that human trafficking and homelessness is a vicious circle. As the sheriff pointed out, when they break their bonds and run free, a lot of times they're not going to seek law enforcement. They are immediately homeless. When they do seek law enforcement help, of course, sheriff and the deputies do everything they can, but at some point, the sheriff's incapable of housing anyone long term. He's going to recommend them to a homeless shelter, and then the cycle begins from there. And so when we see homeless out in the community, we need to be aware that it's possible they're a victim of trafficking. And then also, when individuals, maybe they start off homeless, it's that runaway, it's that person that lost their job, whatever it may be, they spend months, years, believe me, you spend weeks homeless out in the cold, you will compromise yourself to get out of that situation. Now you're into human trafficking. And this not only happens with the labor side of it, but with the sex side. So as a community, we need to be aware of the homeless, the person on the street, the person asking for money, the encampments that you might see back in the woods, under bridges, places like that. If you are concerned with human trafficking as a community, that is where you look. You look at the homeless community. That's what I have to offer.
I completely agree with you. They say within 48 hours of a child running away, over half of them within the first 48 hours. That's just within the first 48 hours. It's almost 100% after that. So I completely agree with you. There are laws on the table right now in our state, and he can speak to you more about them, but where we are actually taking felonies off the table for those who have been charged with prostitution, and that's going to allow them to go on in the future and get better jobs, because I know you mentioned that it's a horrible cycle. And if you imagine what it's like to have a felony on your background, you know, you're really incapable of getting a job that can really sustain you. So you're going to end up back in that horrible cycle of trying to fend for yourself, put a roof over your head. And on the flip side of that, I know several homeless shelters that have just closed down in St. Louis City due to legislation. I want to look into that as well. I don't stand really on any side politically. I just stand for people. So I would just look into that and just see the homeless shelters that have just shut down in the city. I work closely with Showers for the People and other groups who provide for these people night in the city. And this is something that is absolutely extremely vital in fighting against human trafficking. It goes hand in hand. So I might want to pass this down to you since it's legislation.
Pretty well covered it. You know, just as I had mentioned earlier, you know, it's tough to find a job if you have a felony on your record. And so these people didn't willingly commit these crimes. They didn't willingly get into prostitution. And so we need to do what we can to help them out.
Okay, next question.
So we've been talking about how human trafficking are afraid of law enforcement. And I guess my question is, why? I do know that people who pimp or who are who do traffic humans groom them to fear police and officials, but at the same time, I also wonder, what are we doing, you know, in the law enforcement side to make sure when our initial response isn't so intimidating to these people who have been trafficked, especially with prostitution. I know we talked about, you know, coming in and having more of a sympathetic view and really honing in on what those identifiers are of human trafficking and sex trafficking, so when police do respond, it's a different kind of response than it would be necessarily to like a criminal situation. Because a lot of women or men who are trafficked, either labor or sex, they don't look at themselves as victims because they don't realize that they have been trafficked or that they are coerced into these situations, and they don't really want to be viewed as victims. So, you know, it's a question or concern as to how we are responding, our initial response, and that initial response really sets the tone for how these people will get their services or whatever help they need in their community to get out of the situation that they're in. And I do know that law enforcement is really working, getting training on how to respond appropriately, but I guess just having that more empathy and just really trying to figure out the best way, the initial response. And I know that traffickers would probably have the best answer to that, and I think they should be a part of the solution.
Well, it was a great comment that you made. To answer your question, why are some scared of law enforcement? That's huge. To some degree, we groom children to be afraid of law enforcement. I can't count the number of times in my career that I've been somewhere in uniform. Some parent will tell a child, you need to behave or I'm going to have him take you to jail. They say that in jest, but there's terror in that children's eyes. When I hear that, I get down on that child's level and I tell them that we're there if they ever need help. If you get lost, you get separated, there's a problem, you look for somebody in uniform, whether it's a fireman, it's a military personnel, it's a law enforcement officer. That's important to get that information out there. And I respectfully tell the parents, you cannot do that. This is why you cannot do that. When that child needs someone, they won't give one. So to some degree, society grooms that. I've said it before, I'm super proud of our citizens of Franklin County. You guys have been nothing but great to law enforcement, and we are truly blessed when it comes to that avenue. And you're right, we take an empathetic approach, not just with victims of trafficking, because when we look at prostitution, it's a shut and dry case in an event that you catch a woman trying to sell herself. But if you don't dig deeper and find out if she's doing that because she's a victim, because there are prostitutes out there, but there's also human trafficking out there. So you have to dig past the initial thing. You need to be aware of your surroundings. You need to find out if there's a pimp close by. We've experienced them here in the past at some of our truck stops. It's not as predominant as the larger inner cities. So taking that extra step and ensuring that, having that compassion, having that empathy. And matter of fact, I was at a banquet last night, a crisis intervention team banquet, which recognized a lot of law enforcement officers when they deal with mentally ill people. We also find that there's some mental issues sometimes with these, and you're scared to come forward. But what is the underlying cause? You know, are they suffering some sort of mental illness that they're trying to self-treat with drugs or alcohol? Cycle of addiction. But compassion and empathy is, you're absolutely right. I can't speak for officers around the country. We have a lot of great law enforcement officers. We have a lot of law enforcement officers that could definitely use some training in the area across our nation and quite honestly globally. We hear the horror stories that are a lot worse in the United States with the young children, the young girls being sold into sex slavery from other countries. But I will tell you, human trafficking is alive and well here in the United States also. Not to some of the horror stories that you hear, but the awareness and to get involved and to dig deeper into the extra investigation and ensure that we're going to protect the innocent. I hope that answered the question.
Thank you, Chair. Before I go to the next one, I just want to say this, that this mic does not go over the live feed. So keep your questions short, sweet, to the point, because it's not going to be heard over the live feed, and those folks are listening, okay? Thanks.
So we're from a high school newspaper, and we're wondering, just from your various perspectives, either be personal or your law enforcement background or your experience in politics, what do you have as your best advice for high schoolers on how to protect themselves from being targets of human traffickers?
I think that's a great question, and I'm going to share that with everybody because I think everybody can have input. My standpoint with that would be kind to one another, take care of each other, get involved with each other. If you've got somebody that's a loner within the school or just doesn't, for lack of a better term, quite fit in, befriend that person because you don't know what type of struggles they're going to and the help that you could possibly provide them if you give it.
And to add to that, I would have to say, I know a lot of high schoolers who are afraid to stick up for their friends if they feel like they're, going down a wrong path because they don't want to double cross the friendship that they have and the trust that they have. But in the end of the day, if due to the path that they're headed on is leading them to, pretty much, either certain death of their soul or, literal death. I know a lot of, especially right now due to meth and other drug addictions, the life expectancy of a prostitute is very low. So, you really could be saving their life when you consider the fact that, is it a question of speaking up to your friend or maybe reporting it versus them hating you? I think that you should always choose speaking up and saving their life versus them hating you or being mad at you for a time. Another thing, too, I would say to every single high schooler is that, again, it goes back to social media. You're going to have fake profiles set up with social media where usually a really good-looking guy friends you and starts talking to you, but that's not really his picture. It's really someone else who's catfishing and pretending to be someone else, establishing that trust and relationship, and then getting you to meet up with them, possibly providing gifts, an alternate cell phone for contact, and really placing a wedge between you and your parents or whoever your support system is in your life. If you find that your friends have an extra cell phone, maybe extra spending money, that sugar daddy, maybe they pull away from you and they're spending a lot of time away from school, there's a lot of signs that point to human trafficking, or perhaps they've even mentioned that they might want to run away. These are all red flags that you really need to consider. Talk to your parents, talk to the school counselor, even talk to your friend, but at the end of the day, if you're not sure what to do, I would say to call the human trafficking hotline. I even always say, reach out to me. You can find me on Instagram at the Lauren Ziegler, and I have a lot of resources. I can help point you in the right direction.
Well, I would just echo what you said. I find myself in this position right now. I have an almost 14-year-old daughter going on 30, and she thinks she knows everything. She thinks she understands everything to do with social media. And, my wife and I, we have this conversation with her, it seems like every day. But, she's got these friends on her whatever, app it is. And we're like, who is this? Oh, I don't know. They just sent me a friend request and I just accepted it. And they're not nice. I know them. Why did you accept this? And so we're trying to stress to her that that's not okay. And you don't know what that is. You don't know what they're after. And so, it is very real. And who knows what we may have prevented. So we do have to stay involved and watch very closely what they're doing on their phones.
Another question?
She's had a hand up for a long time over here. So.
Okay. Sheriff, you had said that we should not tell our kids that if they misbehave, they're going to be. My dad's in the audience. He used to tell me that a lot. And I've never been in jail other than yours on the right side of the farm. Well, it did some good.
This past summer, I was filling in at the CVS here in town, and there was a man about 50-ish with a girl that came in she appeared to be 16. I won't go into details as to what they purchased, but as he was paying for it, the girl was kind of off to one side, and it was not good. So I mouthed, "Are you okay?" She shook her head very slightly, yes. About an hour later, this man came in and would love to have had me for lunch. Well, as many of you know, I've been a teacher for years in the district. I held my ground and kept the situation calm. But when he told me I should stay out of his family's business and a few other details. What else, when he left, could I have done?
That's a great question. You always want to take the extra step. So if you're unsure, as Lauren was saying earlier, if you've got a gut feeling, go with it. So when they leave, if you're uncertain, definitely get the vehicle description, get the license plate, contact the local police. They can put out a broadcast for the vehicle and a check to well-being, and we can stop them to make sure that truly that young lady is okay. Obviously, there was some telltale signs and indicators that concerned you. So you did the right thing by checking with her, but remember, some of these victims are scared to come forward. She was in close proximity of him, so that's a part of that trafficking part, is being able to control that person, whether it's psychological or physiological in there to that person. So if you're in doubt like that, get that vehicle description and get that license plate and contact the local authorities. So I appreciate your heart by reaching out and checking on the young lady.
Hi, very good program, Steve. Thanks for having us. It's a great program up there. Learned a lot. My name is John Simmons. I'm a Republican candidate for state rep. I hope to follow me yesterday until Mr. Kirkman emergency possibly. My question is more on the legislative side of things. As you go around the country, Lauren, or some of the law enforcement outside, are there any states that we that would be something that we could be working on?
You know, that's a great question, and Paul might actually be more adept to answer this than I am, because you know, he's been around much longer. But you know, I'm not real sure, to be honest with you. So.
I researching for tonight, I did learn that there's a lot of legislation that Kansas is implementing because it's a really bad problem.
There are a lot of really great bills that just passed in the House that are getting pushed to the Senate this year, and regarding holding accountability to websites who are enabling human traffickers with explicit, such as Backpage or even Google. I mean, the internet plays such a huge part. And I think that really, I mean, these people are benefiting. Like we said earlier, it's a $32 billion industry. These website hosts are benefiting financially from all of this exploitation. So holding these website hosts accountable to the exploitation that they're allowing is huge. That's on the table. There are several other huge, pretty much, I mean, across the board in each and every state that are really big right now as far as pushing. So I would contact each and every one of your state senators right now, and anything that has passed in the state of Missouri, I can tell you that. So we just need to make sure that it gets actually passed. And then second of all, I would say we really need to push for getting it in our education system. The children who are really at a risk are those who maybe are a single parent family, or maybe they're not as involved necessarily 100%. A lot of these children come from wonderful homes, but the education of these children, of how these traffickers are approaching them and teaching them how in today's society these groomers are going to approach them, is huge, because they're going to be able to recognize these signs when they happen on social media. And I think that the education system, to allow that possibly in their sex education courses, would be phenomenally positively impacting on our society. So I would say that that would be a really great way to impact our senators and legislation.
Great question. Make sure it's a reputable company. There's websites out there on the human trafficking sites that can tell you about some products and some companies. If you've got, let's call them the storm chasers that are coming through, you can ask them if they're documented citizens, for starters. You got the opportunity to talk to the workers that are there in the event that when they're working on your house. So just digging deeper and making sure, checking with the Better Business Bureau and checking, make sure it's a reputable company, and I think you'll be fine there.
There's a young lady here that just mentioned, what if they don't speak the language? And I'll just give you, for instance, I know a family in Indian Subdivision Pacific that had a roof done, and there was one boss who spoke broken English, and the rest of them not listening. That's a tough situation. What would your advice?
My advice there, because you're going to see that. We see that a lot through here. The best thing you can do there is, if it's the long hours, if you suspect inappropriate treatment, if little to no breaks, you can absolutely contact that trafficking hotline that she gave you the number on, and get the questions there and get something, give that name of the company where they can do the research and get the intelligence there to dig deeper into it. It's a no-brainer when you find a victim that's being exploited, such as prostitution or something else. The labor trafficking are sometimes harder to find because they don't always come forward. Why don't they come forward? They're a victim that's stuck in that vicious cycle. They're trying to provide for their families. So they get stuck there, but if you suspect something, your avenue there is to contact the hotline number and report that.
So whenever you dive into modern day slavery, I noticed that there's a lot of sensationalism around sex trafficking, because that's what really draws people's interest in, and that's what galvanizes everyone to approach this issue, address it, help combat it. What is legislation doing to make sure, definition-wise, how labor trafficking, like organ trafficking, other forms of trafficking are being addressed in these laws and legislation besides sex trafficking?
That's a good question. And whenever we're writing these laws or these bills, we include all that in. So it includes all forms of trafficking. I mean, it really is that simple. And not just sex trafficking, but that is something like Steve had alluded to earlier, where the lady thinks it was 3,000 times. Is that what you said? That is just unfathomable, and so that's why everybody kind of always automatically goes to that kind of extreme instead of the labor or the slave, where they're just working in a house or something of that nature.
I wonder if you can give some advice on, once you do report something that you have a concern about, how you follow up to see. My wife and I were in Tennessee last summer, and we reported to the local police, along with the employees that were also concerned about what we had seen, and they took the license plate down. And it was somebody that with Missouri license plates, and they were going to inform Missouri officials and basic argument. And we never heard anything about what we had seen with that. Is there any way we can follow up on something like that?
Yes, as with any crime or anything that you report, you can always ask for a follow-up call back to give a briefing on what happened. Some particulars they can release, some particulars they can't, but obviously you cared enough to call, so you was concerned about the issue that was going on. So had you called them back, and they would have gladly told you, hey, we checked it out and everything was fine, or what, we made an arrest on that because it was a law violation or somebody was found to be them there. So the biggest thing is just recontact back. Law enforcement is very receptive to that, and quite honestly, you cared enough to call, we owe you an answer. So if you was to call back, we'd give you that answer.
I'm going to go to one of my fellow scouting, Kristen.
I'm just wondering, how commonplace is it for kids' peers to groom them? I've heard about it before, and the girls were on a vacation over the summer, and had a boy who lived in the area talking to them on the beach. The parents they were with are responsible enough, the girls know well enough to not go off with someone they don't know. But I've heard that peers can actually groom for years. Do you know of any instances of that, or if that is commonplace practice for kids their age, not someone on social media, but kids their age to groom them?
Very much so. And you're going to see this a lot with peers, but they're going to get these children to run away, and they're going to go to the hot spots of human trafficking, such as Florida, California, and Texas. Those are going to be pretty much the places they're going to pull them away. This is very, very big and groomed. These are victims as well, but they've been targeted and groomed to groom others. And this is very big as well. So I did mention earlier that there are fake profiles of really good looking or other, peers and your children, and maybe they're false accounts. But there are grooming methods where your friends will actually get you involved. So they'll say, come to this party. They'll start showing you, maybe it's a girlfriend, they'll start showing you all the gifts or belongings that they have. Or it can be a guy who's maybe promising to be their boyfriend or pretending to be their boyfriend, and then they pull them in that way. A lot of times they'll introduce drugs at this point and get their girlfriend addicted to drugs, and then say things like, well, if you loved me, then you would do this, or we really need the money, and they'll make it about their relationship, and it really just spirals from there. And the people who were grooming the groomed recruiter pretty much take over at that point. So it really is a cycle that is very complex, and that is something that we need to educate again children of what in the United States today currently.
I have one question. I know that we are looking at this globally as affecting all our locally. I brought my children because I want them to know, do you feel there's any true danger around these parks that, anything could happen to them? We do have truck stops here. We do have several places where teens want to go and hang out, Six Flags, on their own. Do we have any worries here locally about anything? I know that you were saying St. Louis is a thoroughfare for the trafficking. I'm just wondering around any of these parts.
The question I think you're asking is, should we be concerned locally? Let's talk about that big picture. Michael Devlin lived in Kirkwood, Missouri. He found his way to Franklin County, Missouri, and also Washington County, Missouri. So we absolutely need to talk to our kids about, not just when it comes to trafficking, but as Lauren was alluding to, the peers trying to befriend them, drugs. When people get addicted to drugs, they get that yearning, and then it turns into a need, and then a lot of people are exploited when it comes to that. So having the talks, being aware, and ensuring that someone knows where they're with somebody, and having them talks. Knowledge is power. So can it happen? It can happen. Is there any local cases that I'm aware of in regards to the trafficking aspect of it? Most of it's passing through this area. However, when we look at predators and pedophiles, we're familiar with Michael Devlin. So with that being said, yes, we need to make sure our children are cautious.